Hello, my name is Patrycja Rozwora and you're listening to Kitchen Conversations. This podcast aims to open up the mysterious and vague Eastern Bloc to a broader audience. For each episode, I'm inviting one artist or researcher, and together we explore the relation, interest, and the urgency to create within the framework of the post-Soviet sphere. Here, I also wanted to thank everyone for listening and supporting this podcast. It's very rewarding to see that with every episode, the community is growing, which was, of course, the whole point of this platform. If you're a regular listener, you might want to check out my Patreon page, where you can support my work and help me develop this amazing but time-consuming project. You can do that on patreon.com/kitchenconversations. Welcome back, everyone. And this time it took a little longer to publish this episode. Usually I publish every 3 to 4 weeks. This time I think it's 5 weeks. And that is because, first of all, of COVID, since it's still messing up with our lives a little bit, unfortunately. And second of all, I'm also currently working on a little side project that is connected to the podcast, and it is the first Kitchen Conversations publication that I'm very excited about. Soon you will find out everything about it. For now, it's still in the making, so I don't want to reveal too much. What I can say that it's a artistic cookbook. So more on that very soon. And now we can move towards introducing my guest today. A guest that I wanted to invite for very long already. Somehow our schedules didn't match. And finally today she's here with us, Maja Ngom, a Polish Senegalese artist whose multidisciplinary work includes photography, installation, video, text, and sculpture. Maja graduated from photography at Royal College of Art in London, and before that she studied modern languages at Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznań. Maja's body of work explores issues of identity in the context of belonging and displacement. She draws on feminist literature and phenomenological thought. Her unique experience of coming from an intergenerational and multi-ethnic family contributes to her work with fragmented narratives, often taking form of autobiographical fiction with fluid identities and fantastic events. Without further ado, please welcome my today's guest, Maja Ngom. So good morning, Maja. Welcome to Kitchen Conversations.
Good morning. Hey.
So nice to have you here. I just checked before I went on the call with you that the first time we got in touch was like in July 2021. So it's been some months.
Oh, okay.
But there was life happening, so we didn't really manage to meet before. But amazing that we finally found each other in the same space, virtual though, so let's hope everything works out. How are you feeling this morning? For you it's still 11, so I guess it's still morning.
It's still morning. No, I'm good. Yeah, I'm fine. Everything is fine. I'm supposed to go to studio after the talk, so feeling good, feeling inspired, you know.
Very good. Yeah, I was actually last week in London and it was so sunny there. I was so surprised. I thought like England, it's always like very sad and rainy, but it was amazing.
No, it happened. I mean, I would say 80% of time it is gloomy, but when it's a nice weather and the sun is out, it changes everything. Yeah.
I guess that's also inspiring, no? a bit more.
It is. Makes you want to leave home finally.
Yeah, for sure. Today we will be speaking about you and your practice, of course. I'm very curious also to hear more about it, since I mostly know about it through an article I read, an interview which you had published in the Kajet journal online. That was a conversation you had with Romuald Demidenko. There was like a curator, correctly?
Yes.
That you spoke to about your work. And it was very intriguing. I really felt like I have to write you and hear more about what you're creating and who you are, Maja. For the beginning, would be nice to just hear a little bit about kind of where you come from and where your art comes from and how you ended up where you are today.
Thank you for inviting me to the to the podcast. I mean, I was thinking, because, whenever someone is asking you questions, that kind of triggers the whole kind of process of thinking. And I think in general, people always are interested in when artists started their practice. And I think it's kind of interesting because the first memory that I had, or could go back, was photography, because that's what I was doing during my college years. I suppose I was focusing on that. I was really interested in black and white photography. I have a little dark room at home. But actually, when I think about art in general, I really loved theater. And when I was in primary school, I was a part of our a school theater, and we were going across Poland and participating in different, I don't know if you don't call them championships, just like show-offs. And it was really competitions, for like primary schools and stuff. But I find like that was, I think, my first maybe connection with art, in the sense of going into a different world and experiencing it. And also, we were able to write things. So it wasn't only playing some proper like theater plays, but actually writing plays that were about our school or like personal experiences and putting it on stage. And it's kind of interesting because now, thinking about my work and the maybe even future projects that I would like to do, I think I'm thinking more about performance and this idea of staging things. So maybe just going like in circles and finding things that were kind of, out there before, or some things that I was interested in before. So I guess, I think theater, and I was also like very much into literature and writing in general, because I think like going back maybe now in the past, I think there's kind of a big sense maybe of solitude, or kind of like being by myself, being an only child, living with grandparents. You kind of are by yourself and they just kind of put you in a place and you're just there. So I think writing was that part that allowed me to kind of maybe write my thoughts. So often I feel like I'm not very good in talking, but writing, this is my like safe space, and this is what I like, I'm not always able to communicate things maybe verbally, but writing gives me that space. But then when I was in Poland, I was studying modern languages. And after that, I started actually cultural studies, which I haven't finished as a master's studies in Poland. Because while I was studying cultural studies, there was this tutor who was really amazing, and she was talking about photography, and she wrote books. Her name was Marianna Michałowska. She was talking a lot about phenomenology and philosophy and how that could be applied in terms of thinking about photography, but like analog photography. And I was really amazed by that. And then I started to be like more and more interested in photography, but also in terms of critical thinking, and also not photography as a only ordinary documentary type of a tool, but also something that, there's a deeper meaning in that. And that's where I had this idea. I was like, no, I think I want to be an artist. And I was taking pictures before, but I think then I started to become more conscious. I was also traveling a lot. And I was like, okay, I think I'm going to go to London and study there. That was quite idealistic kind of idea. I'm going to go to London and study photography. But obviously, life is a bit harder than that in terms of like paying for that and applying to different courses. But that's when my journey has started. So that was in 2009. When I applied to...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, when I
All
applied
right, so you've been living there for some time now.
Oh, yeah, it's been... I came 2008 because I came a year earlier in order to make money. So, it's been now 14 years.
Crazy. You're a proper Londoner.
London, yeah, don't feel like, but I guess more Londoner now than Poznaniak, probably.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to ask you, which part of Poland are you?
Poznań. I'm from Poznań, yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's quite close to where I am now, because I live in Berlin, so it's quite,
2 hours away. Actually,
biggest city, exactly. And you were growing up with your grandparents. I read somewhere, yeah.
Yes, my mom, she kind of left when I was little. She was between Italy and Poland, but I was like most of my time I spent with my grandparents, and that's when I was growing up as well.
They are also coming back in your work.
Yeah, they do. They do. That was like my final graduating kind of project from RCA, the Royal College of Art, in which I worked with them, and the work was about them as well. Yes. Yeah. I think grandparents and I think even more often grandmothers come somehow often up in like final art projects. Also in my project, I think my grandma came up. So yeah, it's as well. Yeah,
it's nice.
Yeah.
Great. Kind of continuing straight away to your work, I think. Mm-hmm. The work which I think got the most exposure, perhaps, or like at least I found the most information about it, was the Sweet Taste of Otherness. And from what I understand, it's like an installation which encompasses a lot of different parts, also text and sculptures, and also I think photography.
Yeah.
I would like you probably just to give a little bit introduction on the project, and then we can kind of delve into more specific parts of it.
So, the Sweet Taste of Otherness, it's actually, I would say it's the whole body of work. So it all started when I was invited by Krzysztof Gutfrański to participate in the issue, which is like Obieg magazine, which is done by Ujazdowski Castle Center for Contemporary Art, czyli Zamek Ujazdowski.
Great place.
Yeah, so they have a website, and they also have this quarterly. Now it has been moved completely to website, but so he invited me to make work for the issue that was called Disothering. It was talking about African diaspora in Poland, and also I think it was bringing different museums in Europe, in Belgium and Germany, like Soviet contemporary, in order to think about this idea of like how can we decolonize museum, but also what would disothering mean? So not to other as like other different people and different communities, but disothering, so kind of philosophically kind of justified project that they did. But anyway, I was invited to do that, and I decided to write a text because I think I didn't have much time, so I was like the only thing that I could do within this kind of time span would be writing, and actually maybe that could be the beginning of something that is going to continue later on. In the writing, I'm kind of trying to bring two things, which is on one part my experience of growing up in Poland, and then on the other part, my experience of like meeting with my dad in Senegal and then spending time and talking to him, and also talking about his experience in Poland. There was a part of the text which was kind of focusing on this idea of thinking about all the food in Polish that have a lot of connotation with race, which is very strange because you would think that Poland is not a colonial country. Not connected to colonialism, but obviously it is a part of like Western Europe, and it is a part of also of like white culture. So maybe the way it perceives blackness is also in this idea of like exotic and maybe having something to do with the power structure again. So that was another kind of part of the project when I started to think about taste and food, and I did a performative reading in London. And then I was invited to the Biennale in Zielona Góra by two curators, which was Romuald Demidenko and Tomek Pawłowski-Armołajew. And they were also very interesting, like what is the thing that you would like to work on, right now? And then again, continuing with language and thinking about language and how in Poland, in a bizarre way, it's also connected with blackness. I was thinking about all the slurs that, racial slurs that would be used whenever I was young, and I remember them until today. Because that was also something that came up in my conversations with my father, that he was asking me, are people like still using this to denote, like people of black color, So I thought, it would be interesting to actually make an installation in which almost every part is every object is in some way connected with the idea of racial then kind of slur. And so the floor that was within the exhibition space was made of asphalt. It's not called asphalt. It's a roofing felt in English, but in Polish it's asphalt, which kind of you hear very often. Then the pictures that were on the wall were also the negatives, not the images themselves, but the negatives. There was a smell of chocolate, because chocolate was another word that was used very often to kind of describe women. So there's also a lot of like thinking about sexualization and also thinking about myself as a woman within like Polish space. Yeah, I don't know if you want me to continue, like to expand on that or...
I mean, I really like listening also to people. Sometimes I just like really give maybe too much space. But yeah, indeed, maybe it's nice for me to also jump in a little bit. I was just like, the first thing I was thinking about is like, did you show the same work also in the UK, or was it actually like really meant for the Polish audience?
No, so that was meant for the Polish audience. So this is the strange thing, that all those three parts of this work, which is first the text, then the performative reading of just the part of it, during which I was actually giving people food, and then the installation, they have the same title. But actually, because they come from the same text and the same moment of thinking about, me growing up in Poland and how that was experienced in terms of being seen as a Black person, but also sometimes not being seen as a Black person, because that's also another thing that is very typical in Poland. Like, obviously, on a daily basis, no one would, from the village where I'm coming, no one would even think that I'm Black. But then whenever I would come outside this kind of, let's say, almost protected environment into the city, I would suddenly realize I look different. And, that would come back very often. And every time I was going to the city, I would hear some sort of comments regarding the way I look, regarding my hair. But I guess maybe it's not a confusing thing, but it's kind of interesting that there's like one text and then it kind of devolves into different parts. So the Sweet Taste of Otherness was done only kind of for like Polish public. But what was kind of interesting is, of course, the experience that I'm kind of putting within this like little space or installation space is something like so Polish to me, But then also for an average Polish person is something that's completely probably not experienced, because probably an average Polish person would be white. So this is not how they experience, being in
Polishness.
The world and Polishness, right?
Yeah.
So that was something that I didn't want to necessarily think of. I mean, it happens because you make work and it's out there and people see it. But I obviously couldn't occupy myself with how is it going to be perceived or what people would think about it. Because, again, I would be standing in two places, like, me as maybe an artist who has experienced something, and this is how I see this reality, but also I couldn't go on the other side of people being like, I wonder what does that mean? Or, this is not how I see things.
Definitely. And was it also a moment for you to share those experiences with people who you knew from the past, who you never maybe had the time to like really speak about all these things? Let's say your family or school friends. I wonder if they shared with you this moment of you showing your art piece in Poland.
Well, actually, I mean, the sort of terrible thing was the fact that it was during pandemic. So actually, the moment I showed my work, I think with a private view, I think it was only open maybe for 2 days for general public. And then there was so much chaos in terms of like, can you visit the gallery? You cannot. There's only 6 people. Everyone stays apart. That I think many of my friends were even afraid to travel to Zielona Góra, because the Biennale was in Zielona Góra, to kind of to see it, to experience it. So maybe it wasn't that, but I think maybe it was some sort of kind of maybe, homage to my old kind of self, and maybe to that part of like my past in a way, of growing up in Poland. Something that allows me to move on.
But I also hope, like, since you, as you said, you weren't able to like show it maybe enough to people, that somehow this podcast will also like guide people towards your work even more. I would love that. I was actually thinking, so as you said, like this work kind of appeared at the beginning of the pandemic, and so I guess it was in a similar time when actually in Poland there was finally a big discussion going on about the racial slurs in the language. And just like out of curiosity, I wondered like what were your like reactions to the discussion in a way, like were you happy that something like this is finally also part of this public discussion in Poland, or were you more like thinking like how can this only happen now? And
no, I think I was happy because I mean it probably will make some people who go for the same experience or who look different, it's going to help them. So I think that's an important, and I guess the girls are activists, so that's what they're trying to do. In my own kind of being here in London, that I'm thinking, yeah, I mean, it's quite late, right? But I mean, it's great someone speaks about it, but it is very late. I mean, for me, also being here, like I've been for that. But as I said, maybe if someone has mentioned that long time ago, that would also have impacted me, and maybe it would help me, you know, quite often to go for some, like, I don't know, hard times or feeling a little bit better. But I guess it's also different times in terms of social media and, you know, in terms of like finding pleasure in writing or finding kind of the sanctuary in writing. Maybe also comes from that it's difficult to find your community when you're not connected on social media. And, you know, when I was growing up in the 90s, I mean, I remember using internet for the first time when I was writing, when I was doing some writing, and I didn't even use it. I remember I asked someone, because, you know, internet was something that exists out there and some people have access to it. And I remember I actually paid money to someone who was doing a research for me on the internet because I was writing about voodoo at that time and I couldn't find anything in the library. So, you know, they're a bit of different times, right? So I think it's great that now those social media, they also are used in order to kind of not maybe build community, but maybe give people knowledge as well.
Yeah, it's such an important point, I think, that we kind of sometimes miss because like the internet got like so out of our control, and there's also a lot of like danger coming out of it that we also maybe forget like how much good it can actually do, no? So I think it's like a really good example, yeah.
Yeah, like I also think with people maybe who are not so much connected, so people who don't live, you know, in metropolis, who live in the rural area, I mean, it can be that someone who lives very far away from a big city feels quite isolated going or having certain experience that maybe is not adequate to the other people surrounding him. So I think then when you go on the internet, it's kind of incredible, you know, that you can find people who went through the same thing, who feel the same way. Of course, there's a danger. Because it's also the kind of probably depends what experience we're talking about, but yeah. Right,
yeah, totally. Everything. Yeah, in the text, in the interview you had for Kayet, you said something really interesting, which I kind of wanted you to develop here. You said that once you moved to the UK, it was like, in a way, hard for you to relate to the experience of Black people living in the UK, since you kind of felt more actually the experience of the Eastern European or post-Soviet history. Yeah, I would like you to kind of speak a little bit about that, because I find it so important in this Eastern European conversation to also have people like you speaking about those experiences. And
well, I guess it comes from the fact that when you think about Black diasporas, whether it's forming like in Europe, I guess in Eastern Europe, most of the Black diaspora consists of people who came to Poland voluntarily, and there were students, because during the communism, you know, there was a big exchange between countries who would like to be part of or kind of Eastern Bloc ideas, and so, for example, Senegal was part of it. So my father came to Poland in order to study. But when you think about Black diaspora in United Kingdom, it's very often people who are disprivileged and people who were brought to England on not very equal power relationship. So there were people who would be very often used. When we talk about Windrush generation, also people who would be brought into this country because where they promised to to have a better life, but then actually in the end they denied any kind of living that the English people would have, in a sense of like citizenship. It's like they treat it in a way that you are here, you help the British Empire to be built, but then we don't need you, we're going to send you back. So I think most of the people who came in those times, they probably wouldn't be studying, as my father was in Poland. So in a way, you know, I feel coming from Poland and being black, maybe I was coming from a bit more privileged point than people who are black here in this country, you know. And I also think because the community is bigger here, and I felt in Poland I didn't have any siblings, and I was living in the village. I mean, we moved from the city to the village. So I also feel like I was very isolated. So very often, I think my experience of being kind of black in Poland probably compares to people who are living, who came here a long time ago, which is very strange as well. So people who came here in like 70s and they were living in rural areas. I think that's how they felt when and that's how I felt in Poland. Like our experience is very similar because we are the only ones. And then you kind of feel a little bit like, you know, you're sticking out, your visibility. Whereas I think nowadays, maybe for someone who's here in UK, especially a city like London, I think you probably feel part of a bigger community. Yeah, so that's the kind of a difference maybe that it's also like when you compare people who are here, like the black diaspora in UK, but also Afro-Americans, the history is completely different, you know, in terms of racism and the connection with slavery. Of course, it exists here. I think in UK, it's probably a little bit more hidden. It's something that you wouldn't speak about because maybe it wasn't direct. It was indirectly like business involved in that. Whereas in the United States, I mean, you know, those slavery and most of the bigger businesses were built on that. And then people were disprivileged. People were, you know, find difficulties in finding housing. They were denied housing. Do you know what I mean? So the whole politic in the United States was built in order to make sure that black people will not be in the same position as white people. And that's almost like engraved within the political system, which I think maybe wasn't like that necessarily in UK.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, it's so interesting how like all these histories are very, very different, right?
Different,
and,
yeah.
Like we cannot like understand them in one big block of history, of course.
But I guess it's almost like, you know, peeling an onion, whereas like I think in the United States you see it and it's like super strong, and then I think the further you go, but I think that's also interesting, you start peeling the onion, it's almost the same ingredients, but they kind of becoming less visible. Like I think in terms of exactly colonialism, you know, like Poland didn't have colonies, so how can we be racist? But we are, so how come? Right? And
yeah, totally.
So yeah,
I think that really came out in this discussion in 2020 about the language, right? Like how can Polish language have like racist slurs if we didn't have colonies, and we were actually the oppressed one, right?
Exactly.
But it's not like so easy. Anyway, I was curious if you could actually tell a little bit more about like, so you said your dad came to study in Poland. I think these stories are so little talked about that people from African countries were actually coming to the Soviet countries to study and understand how the communism actually works, and is that like an interesting political system to introduce, kind of. Can you tell a little bit about that? I think it's like a really, really interesting kind of
Yes,
trace.
I mean, I guess maybe underneath it all, it was this idea of like, Soviet Union trying to kind of gain as much power as it can in the furthest parts of the world, which also like for Russia, Africa is like would be quite far away. On the other hand, it was kind of incredible because students from exactly Senegal, I think Ghana as well, Morocco, they would come to Poland and they would study. And I think the way it would work, normally it was type of a deal when you would have to go back to your country and then either build certain businesses or just kind of help your country to kind of, build an infrastructure. So my father was studying agriculture And therefore, then he was going to United States, and then he went back to Senegal, where he's actually now still working in agriculture, where he's searching for the sources of water and trying to kind of explain or maybe build an infrastructure where there's enough water for the farmers in order to grow crops. I don't know my father that well in order to, that would be a conversation that we would, of things that we would talk about during the dinner, but I know that this is how it would look like, that students from different countries in Africa would come to Poland. And I'm not sure what was the deal in terms of staying. If you stayed, what would happen later on, because I felt like you kind of had to go back to your country to help build.
It's so fascinating how it would appear that, let's say, the Soviet Union was such a closed place, and you could actually the idea is that you were just traveling within it, but actually it was open when they wanted to, kind of.
No, definitely, yeah.
So it was all kind of made for certain political reasons, of course.
Yeah. But then I guess in a way we should not get fooled that, because I think when you think about Western sort of cultures, it was there for a reason as well, It's maybe more hidden. Maybe the message is not that kind of hardcore as the Russian propaganda, but it was there, right? So for a reason,
definitely.
And that's for money.
Yeah, you're very right. It was let's say, more hidden or kind of acceptable in a way. It was working, but definitely the same reasoning. Yeah. I think I would like to speak a little bit more about your work also and your art, since we are here for that. I'm curious, maybe if you could tell a little bit, coming back to the installation, the Sweet Taste of Otherness, how you combine objects and text and the senses. I think I read perhaps in the text or in some kind of description of the exhibition that people had a lot kind of to process when they entered. So there was a lot of senses moved by your work. Can you tell a little bit how you understand the senses in relation to how people can kind of acquire knowledge?
So, my idea was because I wanted to talk about a certain... Well, it's not like I wanted to talk about certain experience, but I was trying to build... I guess maybe going back to certain experience through the senses. The senses were really necessary in order to kind of, if that's only an image, if it's only a photograph, then you move on or you look into another photograph. But I think the idea of installation is you enter the space and it's really kind of difficult to get rid of it. So once you're in there, you might leave, but you already entered. So you carry it with you and there will be a light or something that you kind of, it keeps coming back to you, right? Whereas I think with pictures of when there's something on the wall, people would very often just pass it by. Of course, it's a disputable, yes, an image can also hang on to you. But I think with installation, you really enter the space. So it was this idea of immersing yourself into something. When you entered the installation, there was the light in the whole space was also violet, ultraviolet light, because there were 3 plants that I placed in there. So even the light was like an artificial sun, this idea of sun, and maybe also referring again to skin color, that is something brown, something tanned, melanin, right? And the plants that were in the exhibition space that you could see, 2 of them were clear reference to the blackness again, which was black bamboo. And bamboo is something that was kind of used so often in order to kind of call black people on the street whenever you passed by. So I really wanted to have this black bamboo. But also another one was black magic. And I think black magic also in that moment to me was this idea of thinking about black female. Because I think very often there's this sense of black women being over-sexualized, very erotic, and something you don't quite really know what it is, but it's almost based on animal instinct, this type of blackness within femininity. And then another plant which kind of didn't have that much reference, but it was a plant that I brought from Senegal from my father, so something that keeps me rooted. And then there was this, smell of chocolate, but it was almost too sweet, so some people felt a little bit nauseous about it as well. And I think I just wanted it to be, I think there's a word, permeate. So this kind of thing that kind of permeates, it's a nice space, it looks, the colors are kind of inviting, but then there's something that you kind of get sick of maybe for a little bit when you stay there a little bit too long. It conveys this experience of like feeling different and maybe being Black in Poland in terms of you cannot run away from that, even if it's okay for some time, it will always come back and it will always kind of resurface at certain point. And I don't know if you read this text that I wrote for the Obieg magazine. So there's this moment, when I'm going on the train with my peers from primary school and they suddenly tell me, oh, look, Maja, a Negro. And this is where it kind of like, it always slaps you back in the face. You think you're part of everyone else, but then suddenly they tell you, look, there's a Black person over there, as if they wouldn't understand that I am that Black person or I come from that Black person. I think within the exhibition space, there is this kind of push and pull between feeling comfortable, but also feeling a certain discomfort maybe, and maybe almost feeling a little bit embarrassed. In the video, there's me and the actress Sylvia Achu. So I was kind of trying to find like this alter ego, like someone who looks similar like me. I mean, she's much younger. But I thought it's also like kind of in a way laughing because we were eating chocolate. So you can see me in a slow action, like eating chocolate and then her as well. And then we are both like holding a bar of chocolate in our mouth, almost like two statues. But I thought it's like almost like pornography, like, yeah, you want to see the chocolate? There you go, like a double chocolate for you, Yeah, so I guess it wasn't so much about confronting. People want something, but you give them that, but you give them a little bit more, and then it almost makes them feel uncomfortable that maybe even they looked.
Oh, yeah. Did you get like the reactions you kind of imagined you will get? Did it spark conversation? Did you have like good kind of material to speak about with the audience?
I think I didn't have that much chance of speaking with an audience because of pandemic, really.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a symposium after. I mean, to be honest, I don't know. I'm not quite sure how people kind of, because with people with whom you speak, they kind of know more or less. But I saw only few people who I know they were not kind of maybe so much connected within the art world, and they really liked it. I mean, they found it like fascinating. They really liked it, like being in this space. So that's kind of interesting. I'm not sure if they found any negative thing coming out of it, really.
Well, you said like you're not so good about talking about your work, but I think you're very good. I really like imagined like the space, and I also felt like all this by you talking about it. So I think that certainly works well.
Yeah, I should also mention, because I forgot to tell you that the plants themselves, they are actually in the pots that I made, which is like a ceramic work, which is also part of the body, like a female body, but certain parts are like just like too much. So you can see, for example, there is a face that is kind of ripped up on the top because there's a plant in there, but you can see like massive lips. Then there is a flower pot that looks like it's got too many breasts, It's got like 5 or 4 breasts that are kind of coming out and they're almost like melting like liquid. And there's also a torso, but it's all kind of squashed and also like almost falling down, like melting. Again, talking about this idea of femininity, which makes me also think about when I went once to a drawing class that was in Poland, and everyone was supposed to draw... everyone was supposed to choose one subject, like, one of your peers from the class. And I think out of 12 students, like 10 decided to draw me. Because it was like a very close drawing. But then they kind of gave me this pile of drawings. And it was so funny because most of them would have like big lips and a nose, and a curly hair. So I think, I don't know, this idea of like big lips is coming to that, as well, like kind of... how I'm being seen in a way, and this moment of realization, exactly, that people say. I remember I went back looking in the mirror. It's like, is that really me? Like, yeah, it's kind of interesting.
I wonder, since you work a lot with like objects, you create objects, but I think you also like are interested in like collecting, as you said, the plants and so on. Like, I would be curious to hear a little bit about your opinion on like the current discussion which is going on about like the artifacts which are in the European museums, kind of objects which got stolen from people by the colonizers and now are kind of portrayed as the European
goods.
Goods, exactly. Like, how do you? Yeah, what's your kind of position? take on that more, not position, but your thoughts on that.
Like, I think there's a big conversation about decolonizing the whole museum. And I think definitely there should be always a note saying where does the, object come from and how did it come into the possession of museum. And I also know that in France, I think there is this quite a big movement. I can't remember now the name of an activist who's in charge of that, who's talking about taking all these old works back to Africa. And I think in a way, yeah, why not? I mean, museums are quite of strange, paradoxical places when you think about it, because I'm thinking about the time when I went to France to do the residency in Cité des Arts. And I really wanted to find some sort of connection to Senegalese objects. And I thought, I knew there's one object in Musée Quai Branly, which used to be an ethnographical museum. And I mean, you go in there and it's like incredible, all these good stuff. But it's kind of strange because in a way, for someone who's maybe not connected within the family to Africa, it kind of allowed me to see certain objects that I wouldn't be able to see. But then on the other hand, you also cannot forget how they found themselves in there. So they, I guess, spaces of paradox in that sense, because they give you knowledge. And maybe for certain people who are not connected with their cultural heritage for different reasons, maybe they could be a certain portals of being able to, connect. But
educational, I guess, also, right?
Yeah. But then on the other hand, the part of education would be how did they find their place over there, right? So maybe even in terms of, financial payment for those objects, giving something, maybe an exchange. Maybe that would be a kind of a good deal.
Not the literal kind of objects to go back, but something like I think that would be probably way more useful, no? Than just taking some objects which probably were anyway making the white people happy.
Yeah. But even in museums, and when I went to Senegal, the Museum of Art, I mean, it seems such a dead space, because I feel like art and culture is happening on the streets. It seems completely not to belong to the museum space. So I remember when I went there, probably it's a kind of exactly educational space for children to come and see, probably for Western visitors and tourists. But I don't think that my father would go in there to see something interesting, he would probably go somewhere else to experience art. That would be within the context of music, as I said, or and streets. So it's kind of maybe also in a way artificial in that context.
Since you were talking about your visit to Senegal, I had to remember also another part of the text where you were speaking about the concept of in-betweenness. And somehow the feeling of being in between comes back in my podcast quite a lot. And I think everyone has it in a different form and shape. Yeah, you have a dual identity, being Polish and Senegalese, but also now you live for so many years in the UK in London. I'm curious if being in one place you feel more something than in the other. Let's say if you're in Poland, you feel more from London or more from Senegal, and in Senegal if you feel more Polish.
Well, I guess it's kind of hard to tell whether this sense of in-between is a natural disposition of my character. But I do think it has a lot to do with this idea of exactly being of dual origin, being Polish, Senegalese. And I guess maybe this idea is of never feeling at home, I mean, it's so interesting because, I mean, it's kind of a strange concept, mixed racedness, being mixed race. It's kind of a strange concept when you think about race. Well, kind of race is something completely that doesn't exist as a concept. Then mixed race, there's also even a bigger concept, abstract concept within that thing. But I was reading quite a lot about mixed racedness in general. There are a lot of actually people who are writing about phenomenology and the idea of phenomenological experience. Phenomenology as a philosophy, how can that be used in order to tell us certain things about race in general and being in sense of being in the world. And people I think Naomi, Zack, or there's also Fernandes, Bott. There's quite a few philosophers who write about it. And I guess there is this sense of maybe being mixed race, you're like a perpetual stranger. Because, I almost feel like a bit of a chameleon, someone who always looks wherever they go as they are from somewhere else. Like I remember when I was traveling to Mauritania and I was wearing like the veil and I would walk on the streets, no one would notice me because I looked like, women from there. When I go to Senegal, people would say I'm from somewhere else. But then when I say my surname, they say, oh, yeah, you're one of us. But then, of course, when I go out, I'm a tourist and they would tell me, sell me things as a kind of tourist. And also, like, I guess in Poland, until I speak, I'm also perceived as someone who came from other country to visit. And I guess in UK, whenever people ask me where you're from and I say Poland, they always say, oh, Holland. And then you're like, no, Holland, Poland. And then it's kind of like, you know what I mean? And then, but the funny question as well that they asked me was constantly, but where are you originally from? Because Poland is such an impossible place for me to come from that originally I have to be from somewhere else. And this kind of question of originally, I don't kind of understand I don't understand what it means, originally. Most of the times I'm French or Portuguese, Brazilian, whatever. But yeah.
That's nice. You can kind of choose, but it's very funny.
Then you kind of confabulate, like you create stories, right? Because why not? I mean, it's also fun.
Not, right?
Yeah, having different names and coming from different places. So yeah, that could be fun of it. Yeah, just in the sense of thinking about like being in between and feeling like you're not from there, like it's not your home. Because that's also there's a writer, and she's also an artist, Grada Kilomba, who writes, she wrote this book called Plantation Stories, in which she talks a lot about experience of black females who live in Germany. And there's a lot about this idea when you tell people that you're from here, that they always try to say you're not from here, but where you're from somewhere else. And they always expect this, exotic story behind
it.
Behind this, yeah.
Yeah. But I guess like there's also quite this in-between space can be also quite an empowering space, as you said, that you can create your own way of being and your own identity, outside of these borders and nations and political kind of structures we know currently today.
Yeah. It's almost like trying to think, I don't know if you've heard about this notion or like archetype of like tragic mulatto that was used. So it's like Afro-American type of archetype within the, could be literature or those like cultural, where you talk about people who are mixed race and they this like tragic character because in their situation they would look white. So they would pass and would be able to consider as a white person, but then the story will be revealed and they become this tragic, mulatto or mulatta. So it's almost like a strange project of how to reverse it and make it your own, where kind of you're not belonging to neither of the places, but then you're trying to kind of make an empowering space within that. It's kind of
yeah. Totally
strange position.
Maja, I would like to ask you. What's kind of in for you for the future? I know you're like working very hard to kind of sustain your artist living in London.
Yes.
Yeah. But I'm curious. What are you thinking on for the future projects and any like artistic ideas for the coming months, years?
Yes. So I think there's quite a few things happening. Like I think trying to think about this idea of performance, but I don't think I'm strong enough myself in terms of nerves that I could perform for myself, but definitely thinking about someone who's my alter ego who could do it for me, so that I can be behind that person or hide myself behind that person. I've been thinking a lot about this, this idea of like exactly not belonging and always seeing yourself as someone else, as an other. That kind of took me, like I was researching that, and that took me to this idea of thinking about hallucinations. I don't know if you ever heard about this type of hallucination that talks about seeing yourself as the other. It's something that happens quite often to people who suffer with epilepsy or schizophrenia, but also it's a experience that was described by quite few writers and actually biologists as well. When you standing somewhere and then suddenly you see a different person and actually you realize this is you. So I was thinking how to incorporate this idea of hallucination in thinking about not belonging or being seen as someone else, within the context, I guess, of maybe race or maybe mixed racedness. And also working with ceramics. Like I really want to kind of go deeper into that because I did the work for Biennale in Zielona Góra, but I would like to work more with ceramics as well.
I somewhere I also found an information that you were you had the idea or like you started already working on an archive like to collect stories of African Polish diaspora.
Yeah, I was thinking about it in terms of like bodily experience. Because, when you think about it, it is in a way speaking about trauma as well. Of certain, like if there's such a gathering of not maybe mistreat, like those kind of microaggressions within a certain amount of time, I think it becomes quite a lot. And you can almost talk about the sense of trauma that you kind of experience in terms of like when people talk about you, the way you feel about it, because that people are talking about you because you look different. Maybe you feel like people are looking at you when you're at the center space because you're, kind of high visibility that is kind of accompanying your skin color. So I wanted to talk about that in terms of like exactly like bodily experience. How do you feel that, Where do you have that? Where does this feeling come from that you are being like looked at or, So I just wanted, I guess, maybe to set us interviews with different people and just trying to ask them about that. Like, where do they feel that? And then maybe try to think about first building an archive, but then also maybe thinking more about performing it in a space. But that would be quite a long-term project, I think, for the
Yeah. Well, curious how it's gonna develop then. Yeah, for the very ending, I think we spoke now quite some time. I would like to finalize by speaking about food, since that's kind of like a tradition in the podcast, and I think it's even more interesting for you since you also actually worked with food and with taste and feeding people and kind of understanding what they eat and what connotations food might bring and how it can kind of connect also people and disconnect perhaps. If you would like to share some of your favorite food from home, which is quite a complicated term, I guess, as we just talked about. But some food which makes you feel good and which you like coming back to.
Well, I guess in terms of Polish food, I would definitely, because I was thinking about it, I don't eat meat. So my choice is limited. And I was thinking maybe the beetroot soup, Barszcz, is something that is kind of connected with home. Something that I wouldn't do very often because I don't know actually why, but it's almost like the special occasion or just something that reminds me of home.
That's the thing with the beetroot soup. It's also like, it's kind of like a super simple soup, but I feel in Poland we eat it so rarely that it's like very special now. And I think for people it's like a special taste, which for me, for example, it connects with Christmas, but for like, because my family celebrates Christmas, I don't know with you, but it's like, it's a special taste. I also really, really like it. Although it's quite messy to eat.
Messy to eat, but when you think about it, beetroot is a good dye. So for artists, I guess it's I'm using it like for drawing. So useful vegetable.
Useful vegetable in that way, yeah.
Yeah, but then I was also thinking maybe of Senegalese food, because the first thing that I thought about when you asked me like that there would be like maybe a mentioning of a favorite food, then I thought thieboudienne, which is a Senegalese fish. So you serve it normally with the rice and vegetables and fish and very spicy peppers, which are like Scotch bonnets. So I really like that. And
do you make that also?
I don't make it. This is a type of food that is just, if someone would tell me, or someone is saying that they're from Senegal, I would ask them, like, are you making thieboudienne, or like, do you know how to make it? Because I don't know how to make it myself. I also maybe even don't want to know, because I want it to be kind of special. But when I went to Senegal and my father was asking me, like, what you would like to eat, I was eating it every day.
Oh, really?
Yes, I was eating it every day. And then after, I think, 2 weeks, he was like, what would you like to eat? And I was like, thieboudienne. And he was like, we can eat something else. Because I think he had to eat it with me, and the whole family had to eat it. So I think they had enough. I love it. It's just the rice. The way rice is done in Senegal is just amazing. They often do also use broken rice, which has a little bit of a different texture. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Amazing. Nice. Thanks so much for sharing. And thanks for the conversation. I think we touched upon a lot of important points. And yeah, definitely, please send me all the names of writers you mentioned. Obviously, it's a bit hard for me to find the names, because I'm also quite bad with like spelling and stuff.
Yeah, it's better sometimes to see.
And I will definitely include them all. And yeah, for sure, something more to kind of develop. I will also probably read some of those texts. I think it's interesting and important to understand a bit this complicated world we live in. Thank you so much, Maja, for the conversation.
Thank you.
Here, just a little additional note that Maja shared with me after we stopped the official recording, that her work, the one we spoke about today, but also perhaps some new work, will be soon part of the curatorial platform Irruptive Chora or Chora, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, a curatorial platform, online platform, which through performative events and radio shows proposes the body as a way of knowing. And apart from that, Maja will most probably be part of a group, exhibition group show at the Museum Sztuki in Łódź, which I also spoke to some time ago about one of their exhibitions. So that's very exciting. And of course, all the links I will include in the show notes. And this was it for today. Thank you for reaching till the end of this episode. I will see you next time with another great artist and speaker. And as mentioned at the beginning, you can support this podcast via Patreon on patreon.com/kitchenconversations, or alternatively, you can also help me develop this platform by making a one-time donation, following my Instagram account, or leaving a comment on one of the podcast players. Take good care. Until next time.